what that happens to PPP, PRI in Mexico in 2000, after it has been in power for 75 years. The party became comfortable, complacent, and therefore became out of touch with reality that is going on in the street of major cities and across the country in Mexico. So South Africa has been in power for 30 years as an ANC, I mean, winning a lot of landslide. 1994, Mandela won by 62.5, okay? And then 1999, ANC again won with 66.4 landslide. 2004, it was 70% of the votes. 2009, it was 66. 2014, it was 62. And then 2019, it began to decline a little bit, still in landslide of 54.5% of the votes. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, the tallying is still going on, but we can speak with authority right now that the NC is in the lead of margin of 41, 42 point something as of now. But the other parties, such as DA,
because I went to Hone, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
What is that?
The people at IT, go ahead.
Okay. So, but DA 23 point some, 0.4, MKP 10.8, and EFF is 9. So it's not that ANC has been thrown out, but I think the voters are also dissatisfied, especially with out of touch attitude of the members of Black's Economic Empowerment, who are themselves the current rulers of South Africa. And you cannot always blame the old suspects. It won't work this time. Also, after 30 years, South African, especially the Black, are more educated compared before. So they are beginning to look for other alternatives. What is in it for me? It should not be about ANC and Black empowerment, since that Black empowerment is not actually trickling down economically to me. So people are also making economic rational decisions for themselves because the leadership had also made certain decisions or certain positions that they're taken with neoliberalism, with neoliberals cooperation that are contrary to what ANC actually stand for. The good thing right now in this current election in South Africa, I did not see the contentious issue of land being debated. So people are acting rational in different ways than what we always expect of them to reasons. I might be wrong. Thank you.
Okay, hold on. I don't want us to get into the elections, the nitty-gritty of the elections right now. I want us to look at general issues. What could have accounted for in terms of the ANC's actions and inaction, things that they should have done, right? Way back, because we are talking about 42% now. From 62, Mandela's time, it came all the way to 70. So what are some of the actions or their inactions that has necessitated them to get to this point? We'll talk about the votes.
Number one.
But I don't want to get into the votes over. Let's go to Chris. Let's hear from Chris. What are some of the aids, actions, and inactions that has brought them to this far?
Thanks, Benjamin. So first off, I got to clarify to make sure that, because I think that maybe the gentleman from Sudan was a little bit misinformed. I'm actually an American, a retired military officer, colonel, and an African.
Okay.
Lived on, yeah. So you just didn't know, someone gave you bad information. So right. I don't have a dog in the fight. I don't have any property or relatives in South Africa. So I'm I don't know if I could say I'm impartial, but I'm certainly more objective than South Africans are about. So here's the situation. The ANC, instead of being a party that governed, has turned into what, unfortunately, so many African liberation movements have become. They wind up being a party that takes what Michaela Wrong wrote in Kenya a few years back, the term of that book, it's our turn to eat. And that's what they've become, a rapacious kleptocracy. And the issues that they try to put on the table are populist issues, which really doesn't resonate with most Black white or brown South Africans. For instance, the doctor mentioned land. Land is not being talked about because most people in South Africa, that's not an issue for them, black or white. It's something that populists use to try to rouse up issues. But the ANC should have focused on service delivery. They should have focused on transparency. They should have focused on honest governance. And they have not done that. They have betrayed the liberation struggle in so many ways. In fact, the ANC today likes to blame Jacob Zuma, the former president, for the era of corruption. But the corruption started in Mandela's time. It was minor. His leadership presence had a kind of limiting factor on people misbehaving, but people always misbehave in government. Once he left office, the corruption increased. And by the time that Thabo Mbeki left, that's when the floodgates opened. And we had the so-called state capture era under Jacob Zuma. But people seem to forget the deputy president under Jacob Zuma for much of his time in office was Cyril Ramaphosa. And Cyril Ramaphosa has been president of South Africa since 2018. He promised to bring $100 billion in foreign direct investment into South Africa, and more money has left South Africa than has come in since that time. The roads are a disaster. The electricity doesn't work. It's embarrassing. I mean, I've lived in countries that are poorer than this, like Liberia, where I had electricity, but I don't have it in South Africa, in what's supposed to be a first world country. Now, there are historical disparities and legacies of poverty and situations that have been exacerbated because of the apartheid era and racial discrimination. But the ANC's had 30 years to correct this. They had a good start initially. They promised to build homes. They promised to extend the electricity grid, to bring piped water to people. But the ANC is not even remotely embarrassed that last month, a 3-year-old at a daycare center funded by the government died in a pit latrine after falling into feces because this government, instead of building schools and clinics, has been stealing money. They had 62 million rand, and even when they have the money, they can't spend it properly. 62 million rand to feed infants and toddlers in a child feeding program in Port Elizabeth, Nelson Mandela Bay, or Gaborone. It has 3 names. They didn't spend the $62 million when the ANC controlled the city. They didn't know what to do with it, so they returned it to the national government. I'm okay with that if you don't have a use for it. But 16 infants and toddlers starved to death. Now that's incompetence, and they're opaque. The ANC cares about loyalty to the party over the people. And what they've done for 30 years is ingratiate and enrich a nouveau riche cadre of elite patronage people who are largely black, but not exclusively. And that is one of the problems. So the ANC should have been honest. They should have been transparent. They should have been effective. But instead, they've become what was once a multiracial party that was committed to reunification and unification of this country, to a party that is dominated by one group to the exclusion of others and to the patronage advantage of an elite group of people. And things are sad here. 90 murders per day take place in this country, 90. That is double the number of murders in the United States, which has a population 6 times as large. We have an economy that's in tatters here in South Africa. The trust is not there. They are not addressing the basic needs of the average citizen: rubbish removal, water, public safety, economic growth. And that's because, quite frankly, most of the leadership in the ANC are card-carrying members of the South African Communist Party. And when they're not being communists, they're being thieves. Sorry, that's just the truth.
Yeah. Okay. So you said the way Chris has painted a picture for us, right, in terms of service delivery, transparency, corruption, youth employment, incompetence, loyalty to the people, elite patronage, crime rate. So these are some of the things that they should have addressed over these years. So they themselves have shot themselves in their foot for all these years and has brought them to this situation. Do you agree with that, Dr. Mashara?
Well, with respect to what is going on in South Africa, like any other post-independent country, there are always a lot of police stats, okay? Because of the obvious situations, low educations, literacy, awareness. Those are sometimes taken advantage by the mass-based movements, such as ANC or SPLM in South Sudan, or Frelimo in Mozambique, except ZANU-PF that actually addressed the issue of education from the get-go when it came to power, okay? So the state of information to be able to hold the leaders accountable is always very low. Okay, that's number one. Number two, because of that education, the South Africans themselves were unable to tap into the economic opportunities that were actually in South Africa. And because of lack of that, it attracted a lot of immigrants, which also became a source of tension later on among African blacks on black. Those who come from Nigeria, Ghana, Somalia, Zimbabwe into South Africa were seen as outsiders. And the government failed to address those problems, that these people are not the problems. We are actually working on these A and BC programs, okay? And then the few elites, like in other African countries, the few elites congregate and begin to divide the national cakes among themselves. And at some point, they can grapple toward the issue of land as a mobilizing factor. But in this case, I think 30 years is more in politics and human life, because someone who was born in 1994 has exactly as a family right now and has his children or her children. So he or she must be a stakeholder through certain programs of actions that has to realize the economic reality of the people. At the end of the day, ideology is very good in mobilizing people, but it cannot put food on tables for the people. And I think this is where the leaders have somehow a little bit lost touch with reality. That's number one. Number two, and I'm glad Chris has mentioned, there has been infighting within ANC. And one of the reasons why ANC did not do very well is because MK party took some votes away that are supposed to be going to ANC because of Zuma factor. Zuma felt that he has actually been misportrayed and persecuted, like what we are seeing in the United States. Yeah, I used to tell my student at Towson University in Baltimore when I was teaching there that, hey, America is not different from other countries. Sometimes one certain individual bend the rule of law for their own interest. Then we can see what is going on in New York City yesterday. Whether you like it or not, it is actually a miscarriage of justice. This is what had happened in contact and case of Zuma in South Africa. I'm not saying that Zuma did not actually imbue himself in some messes, but who among those leaders have not done the same thing, that Zuma is being persecuted and the rest have not been persecuted? So witch hunt is also a factor that undermines the collective leaderships that can shoulder and share the blames in South Africa in this regard. And I think this is because why people are also voting away with their feet. DA as a party could have not done. And he actually struck one of the things, the issue of meritocracy and competency. And I mean, the way that he put it, that John Stenson's had put it, if I were the one, I would just put it in general term of meritocracy, but he put it in competency, which has actually angered some of those people that, talking of competency, you're meaning Black South African, okay? But the issue of meritocracy is also very important in hiring, so that states and African countries, until we address this issue of meritocracy, whether it's South Africa, South Sudan, Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, we will not actually catch up like the Asian tigers. We will not catch up like Europeans. We will not catch up like other societies, because this issue of meritocracy has never been addressed. And those countries that always deliver on service, like John as Chris has said, are countries that actually invest in the education of their own people and emphasize the recruitment, retention, and hiring based on meritocracy. And across Africa, that thing is at the bottoms of our issues, and we cannot progress like that.
Okay, Chris, this morning I was listening to a DHE. He made a very profound statement that the ANC brought this thing upon themselves with Zuma, right? If they had prosecuted Zuma and he probably sitting down in jail, the ANC would not find itself in this situation where the MK will have all these number of votes. Do you agree with that?
To a degree, but not entirely. So specifically, let me state that, so MK has definitely had a very serious impact on ANC, particularly in the KwaZulu-Natal province. They're now the largest party, and they didn't even have a party manifesto a month ago. They don't have organizations. No one's seen their budget. We don't know who their donors are. They've been accused of fraudulently getting signatures to get on the ballot. They've got all kinds of problems. And their leading candidate has been declared ineligible for parliament, Jacob Zuma, because of his conviction, which is what the Constitution says. So in ordinary circumstances, nothing be happening, but this is in many respects a cult of personality. For some people who vote for Donald Trump, it's a cult of personality, and this is the case here. I'm not saying that Trump voters are cult of personality, I'm just saying that some, but that's very much the case with Jacob Zuma. The problem with Jacob Zuma being prosecuted is that he needed to be prosecuted. His contempt of the judicial system of the court, refusing to come to a hearing which he was ordered to come to, because he oversaw the mass pilfering of the state and enriched the Guptas and others. He needed to do that. But there is, as Dr. Mishar said, a great deal of hypocrisy here. Cyril Ramaphosa is accused of money laundering $580,000 at his game ranch. And he had the parliament investigate it, and they said he's not guilty. That's not what they said. They said he didn't commit any ethics violations as a member of the government. That's very different than perverting the means of justice and in violating customs regulations and importing money. So Ramaphosa actually apparently committed crimes, has gotten away with it. Dr. Zweli Mkhize, the former health minister, they investigated him for corruption during PPE, and the investigating body, the Hawks, have the prima facie evidence to charge him, but the government refuses to charge him. He still is a minister in government. He just, not a minister, but a member of parliament. He just left the Ministry of Health and stayed and got a paycheck. Sandile Gumeda, the former mayor of Durban, 168 counts of corruption. The former Secretary General of the African National Congress, Ace Magashule, embroiled in a 254 million rand asbestos corrupt tender in the Free State when he was premier there, and in the braided dairy farm. The list goes on and on and on. So the hypocrisy that Dr. Mishar is talking about here is very much in play. This made Jacob Zuma a martyr, particularly for ethnic Zulu. And we see it in the results in KwaZulu-Natal, where the ANC ignored their internal insurrection after Zuma went to prison for 3 weeks, and the whole province was turned upside down. Billions of dollars of damage, stores looted, lives lost, no response from the police, no response from the government. And we see that still manifesting itself today. In 2021 municipal elections, ANC voters stayed home. And as a consequence, the Inkatha Freedom Party gained 2% more votes, but took over 15 municipalities because they were now the largest party because ANC voters didn't vote. This election, those people and others are turning to Jacob Zuma's MK party, Umkhonto we Sizwe party, which has an iconic name named after Umkhonto we Sizwe, which was founded by Nelson Mandela, the armed spear of the nation. That's what Umkhonto we Sizwe means. It was the liberation army. Didn't really do much as an army, but that's another story. So the point here is that Zuma is seen as a victim, much like Trump. I received several messages overnight from Americans who are leftists, who are political, who are Democrats, and every one of them, about 6 of them, wrote to me, said, look, I hate Donald Trump. And it pains me to say this, but I'm voting for Donald Trump in November because of what's going on. And that's how a lot of Zulu feel about what's happening with Jacob Zuma. I don't think they're right, but it doesn't matter what I think because it's a person's passion. And so they are eating away at the ANC supporting KwaZulu-Natal, where they will be the largest party. The ANC won't even be the second largest party. They may be the third largest party because right now the Inkatha Freedom Party is large. They might even, if the DA gets more votes, they could be the fourth largest party, which I predicted last week. And they're also taking 10% of the votes in the richest province, which is Gauteng, where Pretoria and Johannesburg are, and 18% in Mpumalanga, east of there. This is devastating for the ANC. But where I will disagree is that the ANC was headed for less than 50%, whether there was an MK party or not. In 2021, after municipal elections, based on the data that I saw, based on what I expect to be political and economic developments, I predicted that the ANC would get 38 to 42% at best in this election. And that was before the advent of MK. Without MK, the ANC would have a few more percentage points, but many of the voters either would have stayed home or would have voted for another party. So I don't think that just because they persecuted him, that's why MK is doing well. I think the reality is that Jacob Zuma has always been loved by many, if not most, Zulu, and that is playing a role here. There's an ethnicity part of this, but also the persecution. He is the victim, and so I think that's problematic. Unfortunately, Benjamin, I can only stay a couple more minutes, but if you got another question for me, I'll stop there.
Okay, so let's get back to we've seen the exit polls in terms of blacks, the older generation, and the younger generation. But if you look at the DA doubled their vote this time among blacks, right, compared to what happened in 2019, right? What could be the reason why this time they doubled their vote among blacks?
It's very simple. First off, there's misconception about the Democratic Alliance. It's often called White Party, which is nonsense. Its largest voting bloc ethnically is the colored population of South Africa. It's the home of most colored voters. I'm not defending I'm just giving the facts here. In 2019, in Gauteng province, the wealthiest province, as I mentioned, that province, the DA got 18% of Black voters. And I'm like the only analyst that actually points that out. And I said to people that the bloom will wear off of the liberation rose. And that's what's happened for the ANC. That's part of what's going on here. Most of the population of South Africa was born after the end of apartheid, after the ANC came to power in 1994, the so-called born frees, are now the majority of South Africans. And many of them are eligible to vote now. They're tired of hearing about grandma in the bush and grandpa couldn't, under a tree. They don't care about that. It doesn't resonate with them. So those older people who will be dying off will still vote ANC, and that's why they got 40%. But the younger generation is turned away from them because of the lack of service delivery, because of the opaque nature of the party, because of the corruption. People aren't blind. Now, here's something that really, and this is why they for sure would not have got 50%, and I guarantee this is why. The ANC is very condescending to Black South Africans, well, the South Africans in general, but especially Black South Africans. They treat them as if they're their as if they're their serfs. And let me explain why. They have ignored the Black middle class, which is now larger than the white population. The Black middle class, by and large, has earned their position in society, worked hard, finished their education, went into the workforce, and worked for what they have. They've earned private medical insurance. They've earned the trappings of a modern society, bank accounts and credit cards, and the ability to travel and own cars and property. They ignored that. And the biggest slap in the face occurred on May 15th when the ANC under Cyril Ramaphosa thought they could secure that 50+1 by giving more stuff away, because the ANC promises to give things away. What they don't tell the people is that they're not giving anything. The taxpayer is giving that. It's not the ANC. They have no money. They're bankrupt. It comes from the taxpayer, but they like people to think that they're generous. So they decided they were going to nationalize healthcare with the NHI, National Health Insurance. And NHI would nationalize it. And what they told people, and the EFF called them liars correctly, basically they were telling Black voters, because they're insulting them and condescending, saying, listen, and they used race here, which is unnecessary, but that's their modus operandi now. They said, now you will be able to go to the same nice clinics where the rich white people go, and you'll be able to walk in and get the same level of care. First off, if you live in Khayelitsha, you don't exactly have transport to go to Milnerton in the north part of Cape Town to go to a nice hospital, and it won't happen that way. So it was a lie. But here's the bottom line. The Black middle class, they have private medical insurance. They go to private clinics. They get world-class health care. They don't rely on the failing, broken. By the way, these clinics under the National Party, I'm not defending them, these clinics existed and worked for the population. Now they're complete ramshackle disasters where most Black and poor South Africans go. But they insulted the middle class, and that's a few million people who vote. And guess what? Almost all of them voted against the ANC on Wednesday. And that is the deciding factor to keep them below 50%. MK and then the National Health Insurance, because if you watch the daily tracking polls, the ANC brought out the old party stalwarts to go to their strong bases in Eastern Cape, in Northern Cape, in Mpumalanga and Limpopo, where they typically get 70% or more of the vote, but they were dropping. So they brought Thabo Mbeki and Roulette and Tokyo Sexwale out and begged people, just give us more time. Please just give us more time. We'll make it better. And they started ticking back up on a daily poll, and they got from 40 back up to 47%. And then on May 15th, he signed National Health Insurance. And by May 22nd, the ANC in the polls was back down to 40%. So that is a major role here. So MK plays a role, but it's also the insult to the Black middle class, because they don't represent the Black middle class. They represent the poorly educated and the poor, whom they can hoodwink into voting for them and keep them in power. And there you go. Unfortunately, I do have to leave, Benjamin, so I apologize. But this is a topic I'd like to spend 4 hours talking about, but I can't tonight. I have another engagement.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us. Right. All right. So, yeah, so let me deal with you, right? So what do you think about what Chris just said, right? In terms of what the DA doubling its votes among Blacks, right? What do you think about that? What could have caused that?
Yeah, but what I said at the very beginning is that it's not because the voters like DA at all. It's just because of protest votes. Yeah, because of protest vote. They think that ANC should have done certain things for them, but it had failed. Not because they don't like ANC, because of history, they still have emotional attachment, but because they have failed on the basic reality of the thing that they should have been doing. That's very, very important in political science when you are looking. So in most cases in Africa, that's what we have a lot of problem with. And ANC has squandered that popularity, for good. They have been given chances by the community or the society, electorates or the voters, but for whatever reason that I do not know, they have not delivered on those things. So Zimbabwe, their northern neighbors, at the height of Mugabe, they have delivered on a lot of things, including housing reforms. Okay, if you go to Zimbabwe, the housing market, despite of the political turmoil that started in the early 2000, you are aware of the politics there, was one of the most, and it's still today, one of the most good housing market. Why? Is because of the education benefits ZANU-PF has actually embarked on in the early 80s, 90s, and then early 2000. Even if things fall apart, the idea that there is a group of middle class that has been built on education in Zimbabwe is very, very important. And I think this is not to say that ANC did not have things that it cannot be able to address them overnight. Remember, democratization is democratizing the attitude of the public, the society, but at the same time, in a society such as South Africa also, that has actually been up against itself for centuries, it is really very difficult even to address those all things together, especially in a flashy situation where the citizen would want to actually live like other citizens, but they do not have the needed skills. And also, the political class has also been, and sometimes, in some cases, are tied behind by neoliberalism, neoliberals economic policies. Should they go the more radical one, corporation will just cross the border and go to other countries, and that will leave the country in a worse economic shifts. I think these are some of the things that has led to the present situation. Number three, I think ANC should have done a soul searching, especially with MKP and FEE.
EFF, yeah.
They should have, EFF. They should have addressed some of the concern, rob them of those concerns, and bring them as mainstream issues within ANC. Because the condition in which Malema and his party would align and form one government with ANC right now is, according to Malema, if they are given the Ministry of Finance. And I don't think whether the ANC is ready to do that. Mm-hmm. So if they are not ready for that, because that party is very radical, then they would form a government with DA, which will be seen as more sell-out position than forming the government with the radicals, black movements. So the ANC has a lot of soul searching to do. I might right, I might be wrong on this, but this is how I'm seeing it.
But let me follow up with this thing, right? There are some people who hold the view that the ANC problem started as far back as 2012, when Malema was kicked out of the party. Would you agree to that? Because now we are saying the decision to expel Malema as far back as 2012, right, has contributed to the ANC's downfall, and the final straw was the MK party.
But the problem was Malema saga is the fact, and I think ANC has not addressed it very well. It's number one, when some of it, why is it that those who are loyal members of ANC are always thrown under the bus? Okay? Because number one, there could be Zulus, according to the Zulu narratives, that, ANC has never been very unhappy, it has been unhappy with us, simply because of the activities of people like Buzzelezi, the founder of MKP, okay? And that's negativity of Zulu perception within some members of ANC, therefore undermine the military victories of Jacob Zuma during the War of Liberation. And Zulus are not very happy with that. And of course, Zuma, despite his corruption and other form of misgovernance, was a very good commander. Okay, but because, you know, in African context, when we go to war, there are traditional ways we range the wars, the fighting modes. And if you do not have your cousins, it is really very difficult for you to take the fight. So some people are saying, okay, even if he was a good commander, who were he actually commanding? So those things have not yet been forgotten by some other Zulu segment of Zulu society. And then you have the corruption. I'm not saying that Zuma is clean. No, he's not. And also his radical opposition toward the court also was not helping the situation. Those things together accumulated, and Zuma, who was actually being helped by Mulema, came and betrayed him. Yeah. So there has been constant betrayal always within the ANC, like other political movements. And I think this is what has somehow contributed to what we are seeing right now, because a lot of people are trying to jump out, especially the well-to-do in terms of education. Black African of South African background want to, just because they have the education card, they can jump into other parties and later on be used as, they can use those parties as a stepping ground to advance the political interests for ruling in the near future. So that's what I'm saying.
Let's follow up, right? Let's follow up with this question too, right? So at this point, we know that the ANC is going to lose its dominance. It has, at some point in time, has to go and form some sort of coalition, right? Do you see a situation whereby we're going to have the ANC forming a coalition with the EFF and MK? That would be a doomsday coalition to form. Seeing what happened last week, we discussed the coalition that is in DR Congo, which has created all these problems. Are we about to see the same thing happening in South Africa?
Well, the most interesting thing is that in the DRC Congo, we do not know the literature so much because we don't speak French. For those who speak French, they are aware of the social attitude of those political leaders, the actors of those parties toward each other. That's number one. But we are aware of the hostility. Mm-hmm. What Samuel Huntington always called jealous. They are not only jealous, but they're hostile to each other. So there is really, really jealous hostility. What Zuma did to Malema was unfair. The same thing that was done to Zuma by those on Mbeki. But at the same time, it were Zuma, Malema who were doing that to Mbeki. So right. What goes around, come around. So there is too much jealous hostility toward each other. That would make it very difficult for them to form one government. But if they swallow their pride and say, let's look at the communique, 1972 communique between the People's Republic of China and the United States of America. It was based on Shanghai. It was based on the thing that they do not like to say about it, the thing that they don't like about each other. Okay? And the first line on the Chinese side was that you don't want to call us radicals, communists who want to actually import the radical view to the rest of Asia. Okay, that was the position of People's Republic of China. And then the United States said, don't call us imperialists. So if they actually trying to unify their rank within a coalition, they should actually start with the thing that they do not want each other to say about each other. Okay, that would be the starting point. Okay, and then gradually until they came to the interests of their own people. I don't think whether all of them would differ on what need to be done to put the interests of their own peoples. The issue of land, the issue of education, the issue of employment, and all the other things need to be corrected. And also the fact that people, the Black South Africa have been dispossessed for land, dispossessed of the land for centuries. See, that has also disadvantaged them of the traditional way of doing agriculture and keeping up with the works environment. So even if this issue is addressed today, we are seeing the luckiness. If they are not well educated and have viable economic means, they cannot be able to actually hold on to those lands. They would rather actually sell them to others because the traditional way of land ownership, which is very important, has been lost, which is one of the worst disadvantages that can be done. And you know, one of the things that made me sympathetic to Yasser Arafat one time was when he was asked, what is the worst thing to be Palestinian? And he said something that I did not see it coming. And he said the worst part of being a Palestinian is when a Palestinian died, he or she has no ancestral land that that person has to be buried in. And this reality has happened to South African Black people because losing their land for 3 centuries had made them, had dispossessed them of the land's ownerships. Psychologically, the way that they should be actually attaching themselves to the land and keeping going with tilling the land, looking after cattle, and all of this, and improving in their own rights, in their own way possible they want. Okay? So we have generations that have lost that type of reality in South Africa. So they have a lot of ways to go, long way to go. And I hope our people in South Africa can put their own differences apart and look at the thing that can actually address this problem of their own population and entire South Africa. Going back again to the idea of rainbow nation, I don't have any problem with DA. If they're doing their politics very well, they can win and rule the country. There's no problem because the Constitution of South Africa, which is one of the strongest institutions, can actually govern the attitude, not to bend things the way that they want. Otherwise, they would be thrown out. So going back again to the regime, what other regime says, even if that party is going to win. The US is a good example. People usually say, oh, Trump is going to be a dictator. Even right now, the Democrats are still playing that card. Oh, it is going to be end of democracy. The second Trump is going to be revenge tour, which is not true. Trump ruled from 2017 until 2020, and no one was thrown to jail because he or she differed with Trump. In fact, Trump presidency had made a lot of his opponents millionaires. Okay? So it worked very well, actually. The only people who were disadvantaged by the Trump presidency were the neoliberals and neocons who were looking for foreign wars. And this is why they don't like Donald Trump. And I think because of that ruling in New York, it has that judge and the prosecutor and the juries, I might be wrong, because there's no certainty in political analysis, but I might be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong. That decision had handed the presidency to Donald Trump.
Yeah, thank you very much for that submission. Let me follow up with something else, right? If you look at there were probably like 88 political parties in South Africa and probably like 11 independent candidates. Isn't that too much in this age? Talking about 88.
That is the problem.
Go ahead.
That is the problem of multipartism. Okay? That's the problem of multipartism. In a divided society such as African society, where politics is the only way to access economic opportunities. In other parts of the world, people are economically well off, and therefore they don't care whether Donald Trump win tomorrow and Joe Biden lose, you are still going to go to your work as a Democrat and still have your strong opinion. And nothing can be done to you because the institutions are intact, economically, politically, legally. Okay? This is not the case in our situation. People assume that having too many parties is very good. You know, you remember 1980s, Buhari was trying to do something of similar sort, create two-party system and beat Nigeria to line so that we have two-party mindsets, like Republican and Democratic Party in the United States, where people are born into, socialized into it. And I was doing some political awareness, especially with respect to multipartism, this week actually in South Sudan, here at Juba. And people were saying that, oh no, children should not be used, children should not be allowed to go to political parties. And I say, on what basis? What if their parents take them? Is that not their democratic right, those parents, to socialize their children in the party documents and beliefs. Beliefs. So what's wrong? It should be done that way. But because the Africans are always very orthodox because of limited information, or those who are part of political process are less educated. So they tend to assume certain things. So it is actually negative. In that regard, there are a lot of disadvantage of multi-party politics in divided societies such as ours. And it works very well in societies such as Western Europe and North America, where certain things are delineated very well. Economic sphere is different from political sphere. Political sphere is very different from legal sphere or judicial sphere. And each person knows his or her rights. To whom there is right, there are also expectation and responsibility. To us, we talk about right alone. We don't talk about responsibility. Yeah. So this is what is actually undermining the consolidations or multipartisms in many of Africans and other developing countries. And having 88 parties, where you go to get your sources of voters from, and how liquid or solvent financially are those voters to be able to support your program. They are not aware of the fact that in the United States, party is supported by voters, by the voters. Yeah, its supporters are the one actually supporting the party in terms of finance, not the other way around. In our case, we think that we have to go for foreign grant. And therefore, if you're going for foreign grant to support your elections, electoral process, how sure are you going to be owning that election? An election is a part of sovereignty. Yeah, how sovereign are you if your election is going to be funded from outsiders, by outsiders? Those outsiders, whether Russian, American, European, they are going to be the stakeholders of that election. And therefore, they're going to actually look for their own guy. The dogs, they are going to have the dog in the fight. The fight is not going to be neutral anymore. So that issue of having too many parties not also being linked to economic viability of the citizenry who are themselves the voters.
All right. Now, at this point, the ANC, the DA, now this time I think it's the MK, then EFF. So if there's going to be some sort of coalition forming with ANC, with MK, does it give Zuma some sort of leverage at this point over the ANC?
Maybe if they swallow the pride, I don't know. I don't know. The temperatures are actually very high, and they are negative between the two camps. But you never know politically. They might come closer together. And if the two.
Let me remind you of something that Fiwo said on this program. He said politicians in South Africa believe in crude power, in the sense that they don't have their own profession, right? They see politics to be their profession. So at this point, right, they will do whatever it takes for them to be part of the government. That is why I'm asking whether what Zuma has some sort of leverage, that the ANC will do whatever it takes to bring Zuma into its fold, so as to not to enter into an alliance with the DA.
That's what I was referencing, that maybe if they can swallow their pride, because there's too much pride that fuels enmity, and people are, it makes people to be forgetful of their camaraderie in that sense. But once you factorize in politics the interest, they are more likely to go what Professor Pio was saying in the program some time back. But now there is no indication that they are more likely to team up with each other. And of course, ANC will do its homework very well, evaluate the enmity. What are the consequences from the majority of Black voters if we align with DA? That's number one. And they will rank them in order. What are the consequences if we actually link up with the other two radical wing of our former comrades, 10 oppositions? So they will be able to link them. And what are the concessions that the ANC is more likely to give to those? Because each will come with its own expectation. If I don't have this one, I will not be part of. Okay, and then the most important is who will be the people nominated by ANC to negotiate, because that point is also very important. The chief negotiator, whom are you going to send to negotiate with Malema? Who is the most respected with the ANC that Malema and can sit down with him and talk and can swallow some of the insult Malema is throwing at him or her, okay? And the same with Zuma. You know, can Ramaphosa say, okay, we are comrades right now. It's not me about being head of the state. If it was not because of what you did, I might have not been the head of this current state of South Africa. Let's sit down, Jacob. Whatever had happened, had happened. Okay, recognize me, I will recognize you, and I can even pardon you. Yeah. And relieve some of those problems. So those are the things that will be done behind the closed door. We will not be privy to them. But if we are lucky, maybe we'll hear some of them from our South African friends who have more local informants on the ground in South Africa.
Yeah. Earlier on, you mentioned the issue of whatever happened was a protest vote.
Protest vote.
Yeah, there is some sort of chasm between the older generation, the Mandela generation, right, and the younger people. The youth they are looking at the DA as an alternative, but like you said, the DA was able to double its votes. So basically, you can see that a lot of young people voted in the direction of the DA, but the older people, because they are so much discontented with the ANC, they abstained. Right. What will compel the situation to change in terms of the ANC reaching out to mitigate some of the challenges that they are facing in the country?
It is for ANC first and foremost to admit that it has done a lot of blunders. Okay. Number two is for ANC to work very hard and not expect anything that it has actually liberated South Africa and brought down apartheid. No, it has been 30 years. And therefore, ANC must go after those people with clear agenda, not to see them as Black people that should understand where and what circumstances are making ANC to behave the way it is currently behaving. So those things must be out of window. Take them as voters, South African, and they want something. They want to have good jobs, good medical care, good university to go to, good car to drive, okay? And then perhaps South African dream that it can be reached. And there are hopes that you can be able to acquire those resources for yourself. And I think ANC can pull those things off. Again, if it goes on soul searching, number one, and be able to go back to some of its old comrades that are most respected, perhaps an agenda, even agenda that some ANC people can end up attacking some ANC leaders, so that the message is in there that there's a soul searching within the party. I mean, Akwe, we are talking of social media. We are not talking on traditional media. Otherwise, you and I will not be on media. So this advantage is also must be felt by all political leaders, that there are other sources of information, and people who are educated can access that information and make a rationalized decision that is good for them economically, socially, politically, or otherwise, without them being dictated or adhering to it by the party. They can vote with their feet.
So where do you see the issue of land redistribution? Where do you see it in the scheme of things in terms of the coalition?
But it was not even raised by either party, by all those parties. I will not even accuse DA, no. Yeah. But the three parties did not talk about it so much. So it is not actually a priority, although it is one of those priorities that led to the breaking out of the war in the 60s. It was all about land. Remember, the Kenyans anti-colonial movement was based on land. The Zimbabwe was based on land. South Africa was based on land. SWAPO was based on land. Okay? Algeria. Okay? These were uniquely different from other cases of Africans' anti-colonial movements. So the issue of land is real in South Africa. But I'm so surprised. What happened? It did not actually come up on the top as one of those agendas to be discussed so that you mobilize the vote. Maybe it is because of the generation that is fell out of touch with it. The young generation that was born in 1994 did not have much attachment to that issue because they are worrying about the current economic realities, not about the land. The great-great-grandparents have been dispossessed and they grew up in a family that do not talk about these issues because the thing that you always have, the kingdom of memories, and the thing that you always hear them being discussed by your parents, and they are passed down from one generation to another. Maybe they have the knowledge about it, but economic reality, you have to live right now to talk about those issues. If you are not alive, you cannot talk about those issues. You remember the liberation theology, the Black liberation theology. Soul must be saved on earth before they are saved in heaven. Okay? You remember that line?
Yeah, sure.
So,
all right, so one of the issues that we have has to do with unemployment among younger generation, right? And Ramaphosa promised bringing in almost like a $16 billion investment into the country. He's not be able to do that. And now,
where?
Mostly coming mostly from the United States, right? Now we have a situation whereby the state of South Africa is now engaged in this ICC issue with Israel, which the US has some interest. How do you think this whole foreign direct investment, mostly coming from the United States, is going to play out going forward, given the situation happening with the Palestinian issue?
This is the dichotomy and dynamic of politics. Politics is always local. If the position that was taken by South African states to sue the state of Israel for the violation in Palestine is very popular with South Africans based on their struggles, then I don't see any problem. Whether the United States and other Western countries do not like it, it is the right of South Africans, and foreign policy is the reflection of domestic agenda in international affairs. That's number one. Number two, what is going to be the backlash? Yes, because you have to have trade-off. Are the Arab countries going to actually coming up to the financial rescue of the state of South Africa for taking up the Palestinian issue more than any Arab country? Did an Arab country adopt that top line position to take the state of Israel to court for the violation of rights of Palestinians? No. And these are the honest discussion that should be done. You know, politics is all about trade-offs. What is the trade-off for South Africa from the Arab world? Of course, the Arab right now have a lot of money. 16 billion is nothing to them if they want to compensate for the good things that the South Africans have done to the Arab parliaments and Muslims. So it remains to be seen. And I have not seen anything on media being discussed about this issue, because South Africans should have also thought about the blowback from the West. Yes, Wall Street and the Beltway. What should have been done? Because to address this issue of employment, even if you are going to address the issue of injustices in Gaza, what about the issue of unemployment and crime in South Africa, which is worse off? A regular or an average South African can just say, what am I going to be dying? Okay, I'm dying here of poverty, crimes, and poor medical situations in South Africa. Why should actually a lot of money be invested to actually prosecute a case 1,000 miles away in the Netherlands? So unless South African state has some way to actually engage the Arabs to upset what it might actually lost from the United States because of the current position it has taken in regard to the state of Israel and Palestinian conflict.
All right, let me follow up, right? The situation that we are, we're going to form coalitions, right? What is going to be the impact of these coalitions on regional security or on the African continent as a whole?
Of course, ANC is still going to have a hand on the coalitions. So the position of South Africa is still going to be very, very the same in that regard. Maybe this issue of South Africa with ICC might be somehow shaken up, especially when it actually aligns its coalition government with DA. But we do not know some of those guys, what is their foreign policy view. But Malema agree with Ramaphosa on that. Even I don't know about Zuma, but Zuma might be very reserved on that. Okay, but Malema for sure is into it. He's 100% supportive of that. This is not to say that he's anti-Israel, but it's a position that he supports. But with DA, we have to actually treat with care and conscience. Some of white South African might not be very happy with the position taken by South Africa. Remember, apartheid with Israel were very close, were allies. Remember also the South Africans' nuclear weapon was developed in collaboration with Tel Aviv. So there are still those relations in place. And also the South African church, the Dutch reforms, was very militant, like the Zionists.
All right, so let's get your concluding remarks, right? In terms of going forward, we are still waiting for the results to come up, right? Let's hope that at least they might be somewhere around 45, 46, they will need only probably the EFF or just one party just to form the coalition. What is going to be your concluding remarks going forward?
Number one, there's going to be a coalition government formed. Okay? By whom is what I do not know. But given the constitutions of South Africa, you have to have 51 plus or 50 plus, okay? So at least there's not going to be a second round election, but there's going to be a coalition government formed as a result of this election. Second, there's going to be soul searching within the ANC. And a lot of fingers are going to be pointed, okay? A and BC should have been addressed. What should have been addressed in 1994? And if I were them, I would actually go back 94, 99, to 2004, 2009, 2014, 2019. Look at the issues that should have actually been addressed, but have not been addressed by ANC. Otherwise, if they don't actually do a real soul searching and address some of these issues, hey, people are very rational. The next elections might lead to the winning of one of these parties, okay? Maybe not Malema party, maybe not Zuma party, but maybe DA, okay? And that will be a big shock and pushback for South Africa. And who are going to bring DA to power are, of course, Black South African, not white South African in terms of population. So I think those things have to be realized. And third and final, I think this is a protest vote, okay? Pushing back a little bit, teach him a lessons, ANC, so that it actually rejuvenate itself and put himself back to balance and focus on things that make sense. And maybe later on, whoever is going to be the next Secretary Generals, because this is the last term for Ramaphosa. It's going to be very, very interesting. And if they are going to do some soul searching together, Malema, Zuma, and the president, Ramaphosa, you know, it's not too far away. It's not too late. They can do it. They can swallow the differences and moderate the jealous hostility toward each other and call themselves comrade again. So thank you so very much.
All right, thank you very much. We'll talk later on. Or for those of us joining on the social media platform, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week, Friday, on our next series. All right, enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you so very much, Doc. Appreciate it. What's up?